JPC with Professor Uri Alon of Weizmann Institute, who will speak about a model he developed, which will hopefully allow us to gradually restart the economy while protecting our health. I want to thank my colleagues at JPC for facilitating this webinar. Professor Alon will start with a short introduction and then we'll open up for Q&A. You are on mute, so please type your questions on chat and he will answer them. Either he looks at them or I'll read them loudly. Professor Alon is a systems biologist at the Weizmann Institute of Science. His highly cited research investigates gene expression, network motifs, and the design principles of biological networks. He earned his bachelor's and master's degree from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and his PhD in theoretical physics from the Weizmann Institute of Science. In 2004, Professor Alon was awarded the Overton Prize for outstanding accomplishment by a scientist in the early to mid stage of his or her career by the International Society for Computational Biology. And just a note about further today, we want to draw your attention to a webinar at 5:30 p.m. with General Amos Yadlin, President of INSS, on exit strategy. We send you an invitation about this. Professor Alon, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm speaking from the Weizmann Institute in Israel. We have a health epidemic. We also have an economic epidemic, you can say. This work started when some of my friends who build a business in over 20 years seemed to lose it overnight. And this tragedy of families going bankrupt kept me awake at night. I was thinking, how can we, if we have to do lockdown in order to control the epidemic, how can we do a smart lockdown that can tune or balance the need to control the epidemic and provide a measure of economic activity that's reduced but still prevents massive unemployment, because we know that massive unemployment has severe societal and health impact, and prolonged lockdown is just untenable. And the idea we came upon uses mathematical models, epidemiological models, which are very powerful because they represent kind of a worst case scenario, so we trust them. And these models, and our solution is called intermittent lockdown. So once you have a lockdown that's working, that is to say, you see that your case numbers every day are stabilized or starting to go down. Now you think what to do. If you stop the lockdown, you can have economic activity, but then there can be a resurge of the disease. And then you need to do a lockdown again, and then wait for it to go away. And then this kind of start-stop cycles discussed are very, create a lot of uncertainty because you don't know when and how long the next lockdown will be. And so we have a better solution. Our solution is to, once case numbers goes down, to go to a cycle of work and lockdown. We find that a good compromise is 4 days of work, 10 days of lockdown. That means every 2 weeks, you have 4 fixed days of work and 10 days of lockdown. And that means, that has 2 advantages. First of all, it reduces the exposure time of the virus to many people by 4/14, which is 2/7. So it really reduces the opportunity the virus has to transmit to many, many people. So that's restricting the time of the virus. And the second effect is using the time scale of the virus against itself. So we know that this virus, once you get infected, you have 3 days where you're not infectious, it's a latent period, and then you become infectious, and for an average of 4 more days. I mean, some people it's longer, but that's why you need to quarantine for 14 days. But for the majority of people, it's 4 days that you're infectious. So now this 4-10 cycle means that those infected at work are latent at work and become peak infectious during lockdown. And so you take the most dangerous time when people are infectious and put that in lockdown, and that means they don't infect very many people at work. So these two effects, time restriction and this anti-phasing effect, using the timescale of the virus against itself, really reduces the ability of the virus to transmit. And what we know we want to do in order to control the epidemic is make sure the replication number is below 1. Replication number means how many people an infected person infects. If it's above 1, like 2, the epidemic grows exponentially. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. 16. If it's below 1, like 1/2, it shrinks. 1/2, 1/4, 1/8. So we want to keep this replication number below 1. And these two effects I'm talking about in the 4-10 cycle, make sure of that. So just to make clear, the entire population knows very clearly and easily that you have 4 days of full economic activity, and then 10 days of lockdown, and then 4 days of economic activity, and then 10 days of lockdown. That's the simple, very simple to enforce, because you know which ways to enforce the lockdown. There's also a staggered variant where half of the population works 1 week, 4 days, and then the other half works 1 week, 4 days. That'll also work, but it's a little bit more complicated to enforce. Now, the question is, can you have an economy with 4 days out of 14, right? So it's like a 2-day work week, you can say effectively. You get 4 days out of 2 weeks, which 2 weeks have 10 work days. So you have 40% of the work days. So it depends on the sector. Some sectors can thrive. Sectors with low fixed costs, etc., can thrive. But I think the main thing is it gives those millions of non-essential workers, which are now unemployed or on leave without pay, a 40% job, which is a huge difference from being unemployed. And that has tremendous psychological effects. It helps people preserve their skills. And we believe has very strong economic benefits. Some sectors, you know, where you need a continuous production line, maybe they'll have special permission to work in shifts, 1 week yes, 1 week no, or something like that. So some sectors need that. But a lot of sectors can make do with a 4 day out of 10 cycle. And I want to say that during this time, we want to stress that all the wise epidemiological measures should keep on going. I mean, you should keep on with the rapid testing and the extensive testing and the contact tracing, the hygiene, the social distancing, the finding of regions which are infected and isolation of regions, et cetera, et cetera. All these need to go on. Why? Because during the work days, we don't want people to start compensating for the lockdown by having a lot of social activities and a lot of contacts. Those work days need to be Corona-style work. We want to preserve the economy, but it's still under a lot of social distancing in order to make sure that we don't get out of the range where this stops working. And if you want to do it conservatively, you can start simply after lockdown, do 1 work day, then do a lockdown, 2 work days, 3 work days, 4 work days, start building up. If it doesn't work, you'll see a small trend of increase in cases, and you can always go back to lockdown or reduce work days. So it's tunable, adaptable. And it prevents resurges because it gives the virus R less than 1, and you don't have to worry that there'll be a resurge. The epidemic is under control, but at the cost of this intermittent work cycle. And I'm hoping I'm clear. I can't see any of you.
Yeah, I understood what you said, but can I ask you, did you think about maybe shifts in which, let's say there is a grocery, you can't keep it open 4 days and then 10 days close it. So maybe to create shifts in which people rotate who don't mix with each other.
So this is called the staggered cyclic strategy. And then what you have is you take households in the country, and half the households work 1 week and the other half work the other week, each one keeping its own 4-10 cycle spaced by 1 week. Did I explain myself?
Yes.
And this way you can have continuity, and you'll have some cross infections between those two groups, but in our models it looks like that'll work also. It's just a little bit more difficult to enforce the lockdown. If you need to enforce the lockdown, you see someone on the street, you don't know if shift 1, shift 2, that's a disadvantage. So that's a policy decision. Did I explain myself?
Yes. A question. Your idea is innovative and it seems to offer a solution, but we hear a lot of other ideas. For example, we'll hear one from General Yadlin later this afternoon. Question is is there any synergy between people who come up with solutions? Did you approach anybody maybe to introduce your model into their ideas, or vice versa?
Yeah, there is tremendous synergy, and combinations usually work better. Yeah, for sure. So we are in contact with Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Education, and other parts of the government who are very interested in this. And now we're basically simulating situations that they propose. And it seems to resonate with other solutions. So for example, this staggered solution together with this 410 is a combination of two solutions. And you can add all kinds of smart testing and all kinds of smart contact tracing and separation of the population into different groups, high risk, low risk. All this can work together and should work together. We definitely offer an ingredient that that offers another way to, let's say, epidemiologically or from the disease point of view, reduce the virus's capacity. And this can compound with other ideas. Did I explain myself?
Yes. Can I interject a personal question? How do you work today? I mean, you guys at Weizmann Institute, you need your labs, no? Or you stay at home?
Okay, so people who are doing experiments really need to be physically present. And the Weizmann Institute is enforced.
Froze for a second.
Yeah, so we have a rule that you can't go more than a certain. Can you hear me?
No, say again, because you froze for a while.
So people who do experiments need to be there, and the Weizmann now has a rule where there's a maximum number of people per group that can be at the same time. But that's the way we work. But for the thing I'm proposing is based on mathematical models and computer simulations, and we very effectively work with Zoom and with the phone and share files. Now we have a team that has economists, epidemiologists, political scientists, and us, let's say mathematical epidemiologists and physicists, to explore the different aspects of this proposal and its impact on the economy and public health.
Yes. The scientific community is global. Do you have any contacts with your colleagues abroad? You hear some ideas, they share with you what they're thinking about?
Yes. I mean, we're constantly in touch. Twitter has become a very strong scientific tool, so we really know what people are thinking, and we're in touch with scientists in the US and in Europe who are, dropped the regular science and are concentrating on exit strategies and on thinking about different ways to address the current crisis. And I think the scientific community is basically all in on thinking about it and sharing ideas without really barriers and egos. It's really very beautiful to see. At Weizmann, we have several beautiful, projects on.
Like what? Can you share?
Yeah, like Eran Segal's project is a national questionnaire where people fill out whether they're feeling symptoms, and this allows them to make a map and predict which areas will show up the disease, which is very important to send testing, etc. And this is fantastic, and other countries have emulated that. We have Idwamit and Eran Elinav, who set up a massive testing capability, and they're sampling the population with Amos and I, sampling the population to know how many hidden cases there are. And we have people here working on novel ideas for viruses, for vaccines, for drugs that attack the virus, for building up the immune system, especially in people with in older people. So a lot of ideas and brilliance, or to how to protect the heart, which sometimes gets hurt in COVID. So the campus is ablaze with ideas. It's really very beautiful.
Back to your model, what about the islands of which are infected differently from the rest of the population? We're talking mainly about the orthodox hotspots, Debrak, Modi'in Illit, Elad. They should be excluded from your calculations?
No, One thing I want to say is that suppose you have a part of the country that's very adherent to the rules and is able to, in that part, have a situation where the virus has R less than 1. So this part, let's say a town that's really good at it. So if that town does this cyclic 410, it can resist imported infections, because even if they come in, they don't get to spread very widely. So it can protect the region. And then I guess there's strategies to isolate regions where the virus is spreading very quickly and reduce the spread to the rest of the population. But you have to have the rest of the population have R less than 1 or do this kind of cycling strategy in order that the infections that will inevitably pass will die down and not infect many people. So it's a way to protect any part of the population that practices this, in principle, will be protected. Did I explain myself?
Yes. Can you share with us your thought about the following problem, that when there is a big crisis, so all the minds are put together and they're coming up with a solution, but when it comes to forecasting or preparing ahead, we are not doing so well. I'll give an example. After the SARS pandemic in 2002, I believe, the virus disappeared very quickly, and then research stopped because people say, why bother? Are you concerned that the same will happen now?
I think the impact on the world is so huge and unprecedented here that it's difficult for me to believe that this epidemic will cause a transition in the global thinking about epidemics, that in the future we'll have a very well organized sampling of the entire viral genome of the population of the world and tracking of emerging trends with testing systems set up, and that we won't let this happen again. I think this is clear to me. In terms of research, there's a commentary on what's, a lot of research is funded by public money, and I think that it would really help the world if some of the research funding was left to scientists in order to do what they're interested in, rather than what's considered now an important problem. So if we take a tiny fraction of the money that's dedicated to fighting, diseases of old age, and transfer that to fighting infectious diseases, we'll have a transformation in our scientific ability. And so letting scientists follow their own curiosity is the best way for us to cover all bases, not only what policymakers think right now is the most important problem. And the world has many important problems, including hunger, malaria, you name it, addiction that's killing millions. And so these problems, I hope after this epidemic will gain a lot of minds.
But aren't you afraid that, with all due respect, if scientists are allowed to pursue whatever they want, they'll take us to all kind of obscure alleys rather than where the humanity needs real cures or answers?
So they will, and some of these obscure alleys will won't be fruitful. But I want to remind you that the biggest medical breakthroughs came from these esoteric alleys, just like antibiotics. People used to die from pneumonia, from bacteria. Now we die from pneumonia based upon this virus. But for bacteria, the antibiotics were from people looking at fungus growing on plates and wondering why the bacteria don't grow next to them, which is a completely esoteric pursuit, until it turns out the fungus makes antibiotics and kill the bacteria, and bingo, you have a drug. And I would say many of the breakthroughs came from these curiosity-driven, kind of esoteric things that suddenly turn out to solve an important problem you didn't even think you were going to solve. And that's how science works. This is extremely important to communicate. And once you train scientists, once you have a crisis on your hand, those trained scientists can drop everything and concentrate. Yeah, so that's another thing. You have trained minds that are willing to go into the unknown, and you know, scientists like to work together and to solve problems, and that's the infrastructure the world is depending on now.
We just had a webinar with somebody from Migal in the north, in Tel Chai, where they were interested in pneumonia in poultry, in chicken, and suddenly they switched to see how can they help in in the coronavirus. So yeah, it proves your point.
They had a corona vaccine for chickens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tell me, do you think there's an exaggeration about this coronavirus? I mean, too much panic because more people die from the flu, from heart diseases, from, not to mention car accidents, etc. Is there a panic here?
You're right. More people die right now of car accidents, etc. The difference is that the health system is set up for the mortality, the death rates that we're used to. But once you have a large number of critical cases at the same time, health systems collapse, and that's very dangerous for everyone. Everyone with a health problem, and everyone without who has family members with health problems, because that has cascading effects, and that's the main fear, is to overload the health systems. And so I think that's why an exponentially rising virus causes such fear, and really extreme and unprecedented global measures. So when we think about the economics, we can't find a comparison to what to compare it to. It's like a war. It's like a Great Depression. What is it? It's very, very strong. So a lot will depend on these exit strategies and how we're going to play out the recession that will follow. Hopefully use it for making some changes for the better.
Yeah, but that's proving the point, because the exaggerated response to this is what caused the economy to shut down.
Yeah, that's why we need, when we restart now, I mean, it's a done fact, we shut down. When we restart, we have to balance in a very smart way the epidemic and the economy. And that's the point of our proposal. And I think there's many ways to do that. And you can tune a smart exit that will maximize the economic return and the societal return and still keep the virus under control. That's at least the hope.
What kind of responses do you get to your innovative model?
So we get very warm responses. We have, first of all, it's really made it to the discussions of the decision makers very quickly in Israel. So it's being discussed.
That's the advantage of Israel. Small country, everybody knows everybody, and you can call the prime minister.
Exactly. I'm just 2 steps away from the person in charge of of policy and Minister of Health, etc. And so it's very, very tight community, and we get interest from small countries all over the world that are facing a lockdown situation that's not sustainable. There's a lot of interest, and from scientists who are encouraging us to continue. People who use this idea to simulate schools and see a huge benefit, etc. So there's a very good response, and epidemiologists, economists, policy scientists, political scientists, policy people, and just people who are unemployed, a lot of encouragement. So that's why we're working day and night for a few days now to get this out, and we have now put we have a document on Medium. I'm going to type out.
Okay, share it with us, and we'll send it to the journalist.
Okay. And also we put on medRxiv. It's still not online, but I hope it'll be in less than a day, a more scientific version that we have, that we'd like to.
Are there channels to disseminate information? Because writing an article, takes months and until it's published and reviewed, etc. Are there platforms in which scientists can, in these days, share vital information quickly?
Yeah, there's these archives that are revolutionizing scientists. So when you have now a paper, you don't wait for months. You put it online right away in medRxiv and bioRxiv, and everyone can see it and comment on it. And you also get priority, and information spreads very quickly. So for scientists, that's the way to go now. It started in physics, now it's in biology, medicine, everywhere. And that's the reason I wanted to do this interview. I want to ask you reporters to spread the word to your countries and offer your policymakers more options. And even seeing these options can open up the imagination to even more combinations of options in order to make sure that your exit from lockdown is as good for the economy and public health as possible.
Okay, on this happy note, Professor Alon, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us and sharing your brilliant ideas. And thank you, journalists, for participating.
Thank
and
you.
Remember, 5:30, we have General Amos Yadlin with the strategic exit strategy. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.